For years, Evelyn Harper lived on the streets with her entire life packed inside one broken backpack. Then a lawyer found her. A wealthy man from her childhood had died and left her a crumbling house deep in the Maine woods. To everyone else, it was worthless. But to Evelyn, it had something she hadn't had in 15 years. A door she could lock. Then, on her first night inside, she discovered another door, hidden beneath the house, and what was waiting behind it revealed why Evelyn should never have been homeless at all. Because the moment she turned that key, the truth about who had stolen 15 years of her life began to surface. By 24, Evelyn Harper had learned never to sleep too deeply in a place without a lock. Nobody taught her that. Life did. For nearly 3 years, everything Evelyn owned had fit inside a faded green backpack with a broken zipper. 2 shirts, an extra pair of socks, a toothbrush, and an old photograph of her mother wrapped in plastic to keep out the rain. That was her life. Small enough to carry, easy enough to leave with. What Evelyn didn't know was that one of the wealthiest men on the Maine coast had spent the final months of his life trying to find her. While he searched, Evelyn slept wherever the wind couldn't reach her. Church doorways, empty bus shelters. Once, behind a 24-hour laundromat where warm air escaped through a vent in the wall. She never begged if she could work. She washed dishes, changed motel sheets, and swept diner floors after midnight. Whenever someone asked where she lived, Evelyn gave the same small smile. "I'm between places." It sounded better than homeless. The truth was, Evelyn hadn't had a home since she was 9 years old. That was the winter her parents died. She remembered pieces of the funeral. Snow melting on black coats, coffee no one drank, adults whispering as if grief couldn't hear them. And one man, Henry Caldwell. Henry had been her father's oldest friend. After the funeral, he found Evelyn sitting alone on the wet church steps. He knelt in front of her, his expensive trousers sinking into the slush. His eyes were red. "I'll make sure you're taken care of," he told her. Evelyn believed him. She was 9. At 9, you still believe adults understand the weight of a promise. That night, Evelyn slept with her shoes on because no one had told her where she would be living the next morning. Henry Caldwell never came back. 15 years passed. Foster homes became temporary rooms. Temporary rooms became shelters. And eventually, shelters became sidewalks. Then, on a bitter Tuesday morning in Portland, Maine, Evelyn was warming both hands around a paper cup of coffee in a soup kitchen when an elderly man in a dark wool coat walked through the door. His polished shoes stopped beside her chair. Evelyn Harper. Her body stiffened. People who knew her full name rarely brought good news. "Yes? My name is Charles Mercer. I'm an attorney." Evelyn almost laughed. "I think you've got the wrong girl." "No," he said gently. "I've been looking for you for 11 days. Her smile disappeared. Charles sat across from her. Then he said a name Evelyn hadn't heard spoken aloud since childhood. Henry Caldwell passed away last week. For a moment, she felt nothing. Then she remembered wet church steps. Red eyes. A promise. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The attorney studied her carefully. "Miss Harper, Mr. Caldwell left specific instructions concerning you." Evelyn slowly looked up. "What kind of instructions?" Charles paused. "A will." Outside, snow drifted quietly over Portland. Evelyn didn't know it yet, but before the week was over, she would be given the first house anyone had ever called hers. Everyone else would call it worthless, a ruin, a dying man's mistake. But 15 years after Henry Caldwell made a promise to a frightened little girl, Evelyn was about to learn something far more painful than being forgotten. Henry had remembered her, and somehow she had still ended up on the street. 3 days later, Evelyn Harper stood outside a law office overlooking Portland Harbor and wondered if she should leave before anyone noticed her. It was an old habit. Leave first, before someone asked you to. Her coat had come from a church donation bin. Her boots were clean only because she'd spent 20 minutes wiping them in a public restroom, and the faded green backpack still rested on her shoulder. Charles Mercer had told her she didn't need to bring anything. Evelyn brought it anyway. She always did. Inside the conference room, she met Victoria Caldwell. Victoria was perhaps 60, silver blonde and perfectly dressed. The kind of woman Evelyn had seen in newspaper photographs beside hospital directors and charity donors. Beside her sat her son, Ryan. His eyes moved from Evelyn's worn boots to her backpack. Seriously, he muttered. Ryan, Victoria warned softly. Charles pulled out a chair. Evelyn sat and placed her backpack between her feet. Victoria noticed. You can leave that by the coat rack, dear. I'm fine. Victoria smiled. Of course. Then the reading began. Henry Caldwell had lived in a world Evelyn could barely imagine. A waterfront estate, investments, corporate holdings, trusts. Victoria received the coastal home and much of Henry's public wealth. Ryan received shares in Caldwell Maritime and interests in a commercial marina. Evelyn stared at her hands. She hadn't expected money. Still, a small part of her had wondered why Henry had spent his final months searching for her. Maybe there was a letter, an explanation, some reason for 15 years of silence. Charles turned a page. And to Evelyn Rose Harper. Evelyn looked up. I leave the property known as 42 Black Pine Road, outside Ashford, Maine, including the residence and approximately 18 acres of surrounding land. Evelyn blinked. I'm sorry. What? Charles looked at her over his glasses. Mister, Caldwell left you a house. Ryan laughed. Oh, come on, Black Pine. That place is still standing. Evelyn looked at Victoria. You know it. Victoria folded her hands. I've seen it. The property has been neglected for years. The house is extremely old. I doubt the plumbing even works. It's a shack, Ryan added. Evelyn turned back to Charles. Is it mine? Yes. Is there a mortgage? No. Something inside her went still. No mortgage. No landlord. No shelter curfew. No one telling her at 7 in the morning to gather her belongings and leave. Evelyn looked down at the backpack between her boots. The house has a door. Ryan frowned. What? Does it lock? Nobody answered at first. Charles finally nodded. Yes? Evelyn swallowed. Then it's more than I had yesterday. The room fell silent. Victoria leaned forward. Evelyn. Henry could be sentimental, especially toward the end. You shouldn't confuse an emotional decision with a practical one. She offered to have the property evaluated, even purchase it herself. Save you the burden, she said. Why would you want a deteriorating house? Evelyn asked. For half a second, Victoria's smile changed. Most people would have missed it. Evelyn didn't. Living on the street taught you to notice small things. A glance toward your backpack. A hand moving toward a security phone. The moment kindness became inconvenience. Land can always be useful, Victoria replied. Charles cleared his throat. There's one additional item. He removed a thick red envelope. Evelyn was written across the front in uneven handwriting. Her heart tightened. Mister, Caldwell instructed me to give this to you only if you attended in person. Victoria's expression became still. Charles placed a small brass key beside the envelope. Evelyn picked it up. Old, heavy, worn smooth. This isn't the house key. No, Charles said. He slid a second, ordinary silver key across the table. Evelyn stared at both. One opened the house. The other opened something no one had explained. Victoria stood. At the door, she paused beside Evelyn. "I truly am sorry for what you've been through," she said softly. "Take some advice from an older woman. Sell the property. Take whatever money you can get." Her eyes dropped briefly to Evelyn's backpack. "You've spent your life carrying too much already." Then she left with Ryan. Evelyn waited until the door closed. "Mr. Mercer." "Yes?" "Did Henry ever tell you why he left me the house?" Charles removed his glasses. "He said one thing." Evelyn waited. He said, "Victoria notices what things cost, and Evelyn notices what they mean." Her throat tightened. A few minutes later, Evelyn sat alone and opened the red envelope. Inside was a single card. 3 lines. "You survived because you learned to see what others ignore. Do not trust what appears worthless. Go home, Evelyn." She read the final words again. Go home. Her vision blurred. The tears came quietly, the way she'd learned to cry in shelters where other people were sleeping. No one had told Evelyn Harper to go home in 15 years, because until that moment, there had been nowhere for her to go. That afternoon, she boarded a northbound bus with her faded green backpack against her chest. In one pocket was the key to a broken house. In the other was a brass key to something unknown. And 3 rows behind her, a man in a dark jacket quietly raised his phone. He took a photograph of Evelyn, then sent it to someone with 4 words. "She's on her way." By the time Evelyn reached Ashford, daylight was already disappearing behind the trees. The bus driver left her beside a closed gas station and pointed north. "Black Pine Road is about 4 miles that way." Evelyn looked at the snow beginning to fall. 4 miles. He glanced at her backpack. "You got someone picking you up." Evelyn gave him the same small smile she'd used for years. "I'll manage." She always did. The road narrowed as she walked. Houses disappeared. Pine trees rose on both sides, dark and tall, swallowing the last light of evening. Every few minutes, Evelyn looked behind her. She couldn't explain why. Once, she thought she saw headlights far down the road. Then they vanished. Maybe it was nothing. People who slept outside learned to feel watched even when no one was there. Nearly 2 hours later, Evelyn found the mailbox. 42 some Black Pine Road. The letters were faded. Beyond it stood the house. Ryan had been right about one thing. It was almost a shack. The porch leaned slightly to one side. Several shingles were missing. One window had been covered with plywood, and dead vines climbed the chimney. Evelyn stood at the edge of the property. Then she laughed, a quiet, tired laugh. "You're beautiful," she whispered. Most people would have seen decay. Evelyn saw walls, a roof, and a front door. She climbed the porch and slid the silver key into the lock. The door opened. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and dust. Furniture sat beneath white sheets. The floorboards complained beneath her boots. Evelyn closed the door. Then she locked it. Once, twice. She checked it a 3rd time. Only then did she breathe. That night, Evelyn built a small fire in the stone fireplace. She ate crackers from her backpack and drank water from a plastic bottle. There was no working heat, no electricity. She didn't care. For the first time in years, no stranger was sleeping 6 feet away. No shelter worker would turn on the lights before sunrise. Evelyn placed her backpack beneath her head and lay near the fire. She almost fell asleep. Then she noticed the ashes. Evelyn sat up. The fire she'd built was small, but beneath the fresh wood was an older layer of ash. Gray, soft, recent. Someone had used the fireplace before her. She looked toward the front door. Locked. The house became very quiet. Then, crack. A sound outside. Evelyn froze. Another sound followed. A footstep on the porch. She reached for the fireplace poker. The porch creaked. Slowly. The doorknob moved. Once, then again. Evelyn tightened both hands around the poker. "Who's there?" No answer. The person outside stepped away. Evelyn waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then a shadow crossed the boarded window. She backed toward the fireplace. Suddenly, 3 hard knocks struck the door. "Miss Harper." A man's voice. Evelyn said nothing. "My name is Owen Briggs. Henry Caldwell asked me to watch this property." "Henry." Evelyn didn't lower the poker. "Prove it." There was a pause. Then the man laughed softly. "You've got more sense than Henry gave you credit for." A photograph slid beneath the door. Evelyn picked it up. Henry Caldwell stood beside an older, broad-shouldered man in a canvas jacket. Behind them was this house. Evelyn slowly opened the door, leaving the chain attached. The man outside looked exactly like the photograph, only older. His beard had gone almost completely white. His eyes dropped to the poker. "Good," he said. "Good. Never open a door in the woods without something in your hand." Evelyn stared at him. "You knew Henry." Owen's expression softened. "For 41 years. Then why did he leave me this place?" Owen looked past her, toward the fireplace, because he hoped you'd notice. "Notice what?" Owen stepped inside after Evelyn removed the chain. He walked to the hearth and crouched. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he brushed aside the old ash. Beneath it was a small iron ring embedded in the stone. Evelyn's heart began to pound. That wasn't there before. Owen glanced up. It was... He wrapped his fingers around the ring. You just couldn't see it. He pulled... A low, mechanical click sounded beneath the floor. Evelyn stepped back. Part of the stone hearth shifted. Slowly, a narrow section lifted, revealing concrete stairs descending into darkness. Cold, dry air rose from below. Not the damp smell of a cellar. Something cleaner. Controlled. Evelyn stared into the opening. What is this? Owen stood. Henry started building it 12 years ago. 12 years. Owen nodded. Evelyn did the math. 12 years ago, she had been 12 years old. Still moving between foster homes. Still waiting for someone who had promised to take care of her. Her voice became quiet. Did he know where I was? Owen didn't answer immediately. That silence hurt more than a no. He knew enough to keep looking. Owen finally said. Evelyn looked down the stairs. A pale light suddenly flickered on below. She gripped the brass key inside her coat pocket. The second key. The one that opened something no one had explained. What's down there? Owen's face changed. Not fear. Sadness. The reason Henry spent the last months of his life trying to find you. Evelyn swallowed. Then she took the first step. The stairs led beneath the house. At the bottom stood a steel door. No handle, only an old brass lock. Evelyn slowly removed the key from her pocket. It fit perfectly. Her hand trembled as she turned it. The lock clicked. Behind her, Owen whispered, "Whatever you find in there, Evelyn, remember one thing." She looked back. Henry was ashamed. Evelyn's chest tightened. Of what? Owen lowered his eyes. Of how long it took him to discover what they'd done to you. Evelyn turned toward the steel door. Then she pushed it open. And on the other side, waiting beneath a house everyone called worthless, was the truth about why a 9-year-old orphan with a trust fund had grown up with nothing. The room behind the steel door wasn't filled with gold. There were no stacks of cash, no diamonds, nothing that looked like the kind of treasure people told stories about. Evelyn almost felt relieved. Instead, there were shelves, dozens of them. Gray filing cabinets lined one wall. Cardboard archive boxes were stacked neatly against another. A desk stood beneath a row of fluorescent lights, and on it sat an old laptop beside a leather-bound journal. Everything was clean, dry, protected. Evelyn stepped inside. "What is this?" Owen remained near the door. Henry called it his second office. Evelyn looked around. Under a broken house, Owen gave a tired smile. He said people rarely search places they've already decided are worthless. The words stayed with her. Evelyn approached the desk. The journal had a name pressed into the leather. Henry Caldwell. She opened it. The first page contained only one sentence. "If Evelyn is reading this, then I finally found a way to bring her home." Her throat tightened. She turned the page. Henry's handwriting was careful at first. Then, as the entries continued, it became heavier, angrier. 3 years earlier, Henry had begun reviewing old company accounts after a longtime accountant died. He found payments he didn't recognize, transfers routed through consulting firms, money disappearing into trusts and shell companies. At first, Henry believed someone was stealing from Caldwell Maritime. Then he found Evelyn's name. She stopped reading. "My name is in here." Owen said nothing. Evelyn continued. After her parents died, Henry and Evelyn's father had already prepared documents protecting her future. A trust had been funded, enough for housing, education, medical care, and when Evelyn turned 21, enough money to give her a modest but secure beginning. Evelyn stared at the page. "I had money." Her voice sounded small. Owen lowered his eyes. "Yes? How much?" "Enough that you should never have slept outside." The room became silent. Evelyn thought of the laundromat vent, the church steps, a January night when she'd stayed awake until sunrise because the temperature had dropped below 0 and she was afraid that if she fell asleep, she wouldn't wake up. Her hand tightened around the journal. Where did it go? Keep reading. She didn't want to, but she did. The first unauthorized transfers began when Evelyn was 11. Small amounts, then larger ones. Documents had been amended. Addresses changed. Letters returned. Reports marked Evelyn as receiving long-term residential support. On paper, she had a home. On paper, her education was funded. On paper, Evelyn Harper was safe. She turned another page. A name had been circled twice. Victoria Caldwell. Evelyn stopped breathing. "No?" Owen moved closer but didn't touch her. Henry discovered accounts connected to Victoria's foundation. Money from your trust passed through them. The shelter? What? Evelyn looked at him. "I slept in a shelter her foundation donated to." Owen closed his eyes. For some reason, that hurt Evelyn more than the numbers. Victoria had stood beneath bright lights and handed oversized checks to cameras. And somewhere, Evelyn had been sleeping in a bunk bed, paid for, partly by people applauding the woman connected to the disappearance of her future. Evelyn laughed. One broken sound. Then she covered her mouth. "I thought I failed." Owen looked at her. "For years," Evelyn whispered, "I thought there was something wrong with me. Foster homes that didn't last. Jobs she couldn't keep because she had nowhere to shower. Applications asking for an address she didn't have. She had blamed herself for every closed door, every night outside, every time someone looked at her as though she'd chosen to become invisible. I thought my parents left me nothing. Owen's voice was gentle. They didn't. That was when Evelyn began to cry. Not loudly. Evelyn had never learned to cry loudly. She sank into the chair and pressed both hands against her face. My mother worried about everything. She whispered. She used to check the stove 3 times before bed. Owen waited. She wouldn't have left me with nothing. No, he said, she didn't. For 15 years, Evelyn had carried one private wound deeper than homelessness. The belief that no one had prepared for her. No one had thought far enough ahead to protect her. But her parents had. Henry had. Something had simply happened between their love and the life Evelyn actually lived. She opened the journal again. Near the final pages, Henry's handwriting had begun to shake. I promised a frightened child I would take care of her. Then I trusted paperwork more than I trusted my own eyes. Evelyn wiped her face. The next line was darker. There is no excuse for 15 years. Beside the journal sat the laptop. Evelyn opened it. The screen came alive. Only one video file appeared. Evelyn. She clicked it. Henry Caldwell appeared on the screen. Older, thinner. A blanket covered his legs. For several seconds, he simply looked into the camera. Then he spoke. Evelyn. His voice broke on her name. Evelyn covered her mouth. I made you a promise when you were 9 years old. Henry looked down, and I failed to keep it. Evelyn's tears returned. I could tell you I was busy. I could tell you I trusted the wrong people. Both would be true. He raised his eyes, but neither would make what happened to you acceptable. Evelyn leaned closer to the screen. I cannot give you back 15 years, Henry said. I cannot give you warm nights when you were cold. I cannot sit beside the little girl who slept with her shoes on because she didn't know where morning would take her. Evelyn froze. He knew. Henry's eyes filled with tears. But if you're watching this, Evelyn, I need you to understand something. His voice became softer. You were never forgotten. Evelyn closed her eyes. For most of her life, she'd believed money could have changed everything. But sitting beneath that broken house, she understood something harder. The money mattered. The theft mattered. But the deepest wound had never been poverty. It was believing she had been left behind. And now Evelyn knew the truth. Someone had remembered her. Someone had failed her. And those were not the same thing. When she opened her eyes, Henry was still on the screen. There is more you need to know, he said. Victoria knows I discovered the accounts. Evelyn went still. And if she learns you've opened this room... Henry paused. She's going to come for the house. Victoria came for the house 2 days later. Not with police. Not with lawyers. With coffee. Evelyn saw the black SUV through the front window just after 9 in the morning. Her first instinct was to grab her backpack. She actually reached for it. Then she stopped. The backpack hung from the back of a kitchen chair. For years, Evelyn had learned that, when trouble arrived, you left before it could corner you. But Henry's journal was beneath her feet. The hidden room was locked, and this house was hers. Evelyn opened the front door. Victoria stood on the porch holding 2 paper cups. Ryan waited behind her. I thought we might talk, Victoria said. Evelyn looked at the coffee. No, thank you. Victoria's smile held. May we come in? No. That surprised all 3 of them. Evelyn, most of all. Victoria slowly lowered the cups. All right. She glanced at the damaged porch. I suppose we can talk here. Ryan stepped forward. We'll give you $150,000 for the property. No greeting. No explanation. Just a number. Evelyn stared at him. $150,000. She tried to imagine it. For years, she'd known exactly how much money she had at any given moment. $4.12. $23. Once, after a good week cleaning motel rooms, $308. $150,000 didn't feel like money. It felt like escape. A warm apartment. A bed. A refrigerator with food inside. Shoes bought new instead of donated. Evelyn looked past Victoria toward the road. She could take the money, walk away, never sleep outside again. Victoria seemed to read the hesitation on her face. "This doesn't need to become complicated," she said gently. "You deserve a fresh start." Those words nearly worked, because Evelyn did want a fresh start, more than Victoria could possibly understand. Then Evelyn remembered Henry's video. She's going to come for the house. Not the documents. Not the trust. The house. Why, Evelyn asked. Ryan frowned. Why what? Why is this place worth $150,000 to you? It's 18 acres, he said. You called it a shack. The land has potential. In the middle of nowhere. Ryan's jaw tightened. Victoria stepped between them with the ease of someone accustomed to cleaning up other people's mistakes. Evelyn, my son can be impatient. I noticed. Victoria's smile disappeared for half a second, then returned. I knew your parents. Evelyn went still. It was a simple sentence, but Victoria knew exactly where to place it. Your mother was a lovely woman. She continued, and your father was deeply loyal to Henry. You knew them. Of course. Then you knew about me. Silence. Ryan looked at his mother. Victoria's expression remained calm. I knew they had a daughter. Evelyn felt something cold settle inside her. Not anger. Not yet. Something clearer. You donated money to the Portland shelters. Victoria blinked. I donate to many organizations. I slept in one. Another silence. This time, Victoria looked away first. It lasted less than a second. But Evelyn saw it. People like Victoria lived in rooms where everyone listened to their words. Evelyn had survived by watching what happened between them. She stepped closer. I'm not selling. Ryan laughed once. You haven't even seen a contractor's estimate. I said no. You don't know what you're doing. That hurt, because it was true. Evelyn knew how to find a warm place after midnight. She knew which diners would give away bread before closing. She knew how to wash her hair in a public restroom without getting noticed. But trusts, corporate ledgers, property law, she knew nothing. Ryan saw the doubt. You'll lose this place within a year. Victoria touched his arm. Ryan. No, she needs to hear it. He looked directly at Evelyn. You think owning a house makes you safe, taxes come due, roofs collapse, lawyers cost money. Evelyn said nothing. Ryan smiled. You're still homeless. You just have an address now. The words landed exactly where he intended. Evelyn's fingers curled at her sides. Victoria turned to her son. Go to the car. Mom, now. Ryan walked away. Victoria remained on the porch. For the first time, her voice lost its warmth. Take the offer, Evelyn. Why? Because some doors are safer left closed. Evelyn looked at her. Victoria knew. Maybe not that Evelyn had opened the room, but she knew something was beneath this house. I'll think about it, Evelyn said. Victoria studied her face, then nodded. Don't think too long. The SUV disappeared down Black Pine Road. Evelyn waited until she could no longer hear the engine. Then her knees began to shake. She sat on the porch steps. Owen appeared from the tree line 10 minutes later. "You all right?" "No." He sat beside her. Evelyn stared at the road. "Ryan's right." Owen said nothing. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" She laughed bitterly. "Any of it." She pointed toward the house. "I don't know how trusts work. I don't understand corporate accounts. Yesterday, I spent 20 minutes reading one page because I didn't know half the words." Owen nodded. "Sounds about right." Evelyn looked at him. "That's not helpful." "No," he said, "but it's honest." He leaned back against the porch post. Henry didn't know how to build a shipping company when he started one. He had money. "No, I had a borrowed truck and your father's phone number." Evelyn became quiet. Owen reached into his jacket and handed her a business card. "Grace Harlow, attorney at law." "Who is she?" "Someone Henry trusted before he stopped trusting many people." Evelyn stared at the card. "She'll believe me." Owen shook his head. "No." Evelyn's face fell. "She'll believe the evidence," he said. "That's better." The next morning, Evelyn called. Grace Harlow agreed to meet her in Bangor. She was 68 years old, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and had the unnerving habit of remaining silent until other people said more than they intended. For 2 hours, Grace reviewed Henry's documents. Evelyn waited. Finally, Grace removed her glasses. "Victoria Caldwell has spent 20 years building a reputation for generosity." "I know. Hospital boards, children's charities, housing programs. I know." Grace folded her hands. "If this becomes public, people will ask one question." Evelyn waited. Grace looked directly at her. Why should they believe a homeless girl over Victoria Caldwell? The old Evelyn might have looked down. This time she didn't. They shouldn't. Grace raised an eyebrow. They should believe the records. For the first time, Grace smiled. "Just slightly." "Good answer." She closed the folder. "If we do this, Evelyn, we do not threaten Victoria. We do not call reporters. We do not make accusations we cannot prove. What do we do?" Grace slid the folder toward herself. "We follow every dollar." Evelyn looked at the documents. For the first time since opening the hidden room, the truth no longer felt like something crushing her. It felt like something she could carry, not in her backpack. Not alone. That evening, Evelyn returned to Black Pine Road. She placed Grace's business card beside Henry's journal. Then she looked at her faded green backpack. For years, every opportunity in Evelyn's life had been an open door leading somewhere else. This one was different. This opportunity was asking her to stay. And for the first time in 15 years, Evelyn Harper decided she might be brave enough to find out what happened if she did. The first photograph appeared online 11 days later. Evelyn was standing outside a bus station in Portland. She recognized the coat, recognized the green backpack, recognized the way she'd kept her head down while people passed. The photograph was nearly 2 years old. The headline was new. "Homeless Woman Claims Connection to Caldwell Fortune." Evelyn read it twice. Then she turned off the phone. By afternoon, there were 3 more stories. By evening, 7. Some called her a mystery woman. Others called her an opportunist. One television commentator asked why a respected businessman would leave property to a transient with no known career. Evelyn didn't know which word hurt more, transient or known. Grace called just after dark. "Don't read the comments." "I already did." Grace sighed. "Then stop." Evelyn sat at Henry's desk beneath the house. "They found a picture of me sleeping outside. I know. Someone wrote that I probably targeted Henry. I know. I hadn't seen him since I was 9. I know that too. Evelyn stared at the laptop. But they don't. No, Grace said. And right now, Victoria is counting on that. The next morning, legal papers arrived. Victoria was challenging Henry's will. Diminished capacity. Undue influence. Possible exploitation. Evelyn almost laughed. She had spent 15 years believing Henry had forgotten her. Now, strangers believed she'd somehow manipulated him. Grace began filing motions. Account reviews were requested. Old trust records were subpoenaed. Every day brought more questions. And Evelyn tried to keep up. She read until her eyes burned. She wrote unfamiliar words in a cheap notebook. Fiduciary. Beneficiary. Misappropriation. She looked them up one at a time. At meetings, men in expensive suits sometimes explained things to Grace while barely looking at Evelyn. Once, an accountant asked if Evelyn wanted to wait outside while the adults handled the numbers. Grace slowly removed her glasses. Evelyn touched her arm. "No," she said. Then she looked at the accountant. Page 47. The transfer on March 8th. Why was it routed through a housing charity before reaching a private consulting company? The room went quiet. The accountant turned to page 47. He never asked her to wait outside again. But strength, Evelyn discovered, didn't arrive all at once. Some nights, it disappeared completely. 6 weeks into the case, Grace drove to Black Pine Road. Her expression told Evelyn the news before she spoke. Victoria's attorneys are requesting temporary control of the property. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Can they take the house? They can try. And the room, if a court grants access, we lose control of who sees what and when. Evelyn looked toward the fireplace. For the first time, the house didn't feel safe. It felt temporary. Again, that night she couldn't sleep. Wind pushed against the windows. The old roof creaked. At 2 a.m, Evelyn sat up. Then she did what she'd done hundreds of times before. She packed 2 shirts, socks, toothbrush, her mother's photograph. Everything went into the faded green backpack. It took less than 3 minutes. 15 years of practice made leaving easy. Evelyn pulled on her coat, put the backpack over one shoulder, and stood at the front door. Her hand touched the lock. Ryan's voice returned. "You're still homeless. You just have an address now." Maybe he was right. Maybe people like Evelyn didn't keep houses. Maybe safety was something other people inherited. She closed her eyes. Then, for reasons she couldn't explain, Evelyn went downstairs. Still wearing the backpack, she entered Henry's hidden office and sat at the desk. "I tried," she whispered. There was no one there to answer. Evelyn placed her hand on Henry's journal. It slipped from the desk. The book struck the floor and opened near the back cover. Evelyn bent to pick it up, then stopped. There was handwriting inside the leather cover. One sentence. She had never noticed it. "A home is not where no one can remove you." Below it, Henry had written another line. "A home is where you finally decide to stay." Evelyn stared at the words. Once, twice, then again. Her hand slowly moved to the strap on her shoulder. She thought about 9-year-old Evelyn sleeping in her shoes. The girl who waited for morning because she didn't know where it would send her. She thought about every foster home she'd left quietly, every shelter, every doorway, every time she'd disappeared before anyone could tell her she wasn't wanted. And suddenly Evelyn understood. Victoria didn't need to win in court tonight. She only needed Evelyn to run. Evelyn stood. She removed the backpack. For a long moment, she held it against her chest. Then she placed it on the floor. "No," she whispered. Her voice shook, so she said it again. No, louder this time. Evelyn walked upstairs. She unpacked the backpack. One shirt went into a kitchen drawer. The socks went into another. Her toothbrush went beside the sink. Then she unwrapped her mother's photograph. For 15 years, Evelyn had kept it protected in plastic. That night, she found an old wooden frame in the living room. She cleaned the glass with her sleeve and placed her mother's photograph on the mantel. Not packed, not hidden. Home. At 7 the next morning, Evelyn called Grace. "I need you to tell me the truth," she said. Grace was silent. "Are we going to win?" "I don't know." Evelyn nodded, though Grace couldn't see her. "All right." Another pause. "Evelyn, I'm staying." Grace's voice softened. "Good." From that day forward, something changed. Evelyn stopped asking whether she belonged in the room. She started asking better questions. She learned the accounts, the names, the dates, and when Grace needed help tracing payments through Victoria's charities, Evelyn noticed something the accountants had missed: shelter addresses, meal programs, temporary housing providers, places Evelyn knew. Not from reports, from memory. Victoria had hidden money inside a world she believed wealthy people would never examine closely. But Evelyn had lived in that world. She knew its hallways, its waiting rooms, its back doors. For the first time, the life Evelyn had been ashamed of became the very thing no one else at the table possessed: experience. One evening, Grace looked across Henry's desk at her. "You've changed." Evelyn shook her head. "No." She glanced toward the stairs, toward the house above them. "I think I just stopped leaving." And sometimes that is how a person changes. Not by becoming fearless. Not by forgetting what hurt them. But by finally deciding there is something worth staying for. The courtroom was quieter than Evelyn expected. She had imagined shouting, angry lawyers, maybe even reporters pushing cameras into her face. Instead, there was only the soft shuffle of paper and the low hum of an old heating system. Victoria Caldwell sat across the room in a navy suit. Perfect hair. Pearls. The same calm expression she'd worn at the will reading. If you didn't know the story, Evelyn thought, you might have trusted her. Ryan sat behind his mother. He looked tired, older somehow. Evelyn took her seat beside Grace. She wore a simple gray jacket Grace had helped her find at a second-hand store. Her faded green backpack was not with her. It was at home. The thought nearly made her smile. At home. The judge entered. Everyone stood. And the truth began. Grace didn't tell the court Evelyn was homeless. She didn't ask anyone to feel sorry for her. She presented dates, signatures, trust records, transfers. Money intended for Evelyn's housing had moved through charitable organizations connected to Victoria. From there, it passed into consulting companies. Then private accounts, one transaction after another. Quiet theft hidden beneath generous names. Victoria's attorneys fought every page. They called the transfers administrative errors, accounting confusion, decisions made by employees who were no longer alive to explain themselves. Then Grace called Ryan Caldwell. Ryan walked to the witness stand. He didn't look at Evelyn. For nearly an hour, he answered carefully. Yes. No. I don't recall. Then Grace placed one document in front of him. Mr. Caldwell, is this your signature? Ryan stared at it. Yes. And did you authorize this transfer? I signed what I was given. By whom? Ryan's eyes moved toward his mother. Victoria remained still. Grace waited. The whole courtroom waited. My mother. Victoria closed her eyes. only for a second. But Evelyn saw it. Ryan swallowed. She said the trust was inactive. Grace's voice remained calm. Did she tell you the beneficiary was dead? No. Did she tell you the beneficiary was Evelyn Harper? Ryan looked at Evelyn for the first time. Yes. The word fell softly. No thunder. No shouting? Just one word. But sometimes the truth doesn't need to raise its voice. The court upheld Henry's will. The disputed trust assets were ordered into protective control while a wider investigation continued. Victoria's financial dealings were referred to state and federal authorities. Outside, reporters waited on the courthouse steps. Miss Harper, do you feel vindicated? Evelyn stopped. A year earlier, she hadn't known what vindicated meant. Now she understood the word. She just wasn't sure it described what she felt. No, she said. The reporters leaned closer. I feel sad. Someone lowered a camera. Evelyn continued. My parents planned for me. Henry tried to protect me. And people who were supposed to do the right thing decided no one would notice if one little girl disappeared inside the paperwork. Her voice trembled. But she didn't stop. There are a lot of people the world doesn't notice. Then Evelyn walked away. She returned to Black Pine Road. A winter passed. Then spring. The house changed slowly. Evelyn didn't rebuild it into a mansion. She fixed the roof, replaced the broken window, repaired the porch one board at a time. Owen taught her how to use a circular saw. Grace taught her never to sign anything she hadn't read twice. And Evelyn learned something about herself. She liked yellow kitchens. She liked curtains open in the morning. And she hated decorative pillows. Small things, ordinary things. Things you only learn when you stay somewhere long enough to have preferences. The recovered trust gave Evelyn more money than she'd ever imagined having. For several weeks, she did nothing with it. Then, one cold evening, she passed a bus station. A young man was sleeping against the wall. His backpack was wrapped around one arm. Evelyn kept driving. She made it 3 blocks. Then she turned around. 6 months later, construction began on the 18 acres surrounding the house. Not luxury homes, small cottages, 8 at first. Each had a bedroom, a bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a front door with a lock. Grace helped establish the nonprofit. Owen helped supervise construction. Evelyn named the place Caldwell Harbor. Not because Henry had been perfect. He hadn't been. But because he had finally understood that regret meant very little unless it became action. The first residents arrived in November. Young adults leaving foster care. People who had aged out of programs with nowhere to go. Evelyn stood on the porch as a 19-year-old girl stepped from a county van. Her name was Lily. She carried a black backpack. She held both straps tightly. Evelyn recognized that grip. Hi, Evelyn said. Lily nodded. Your room's ready. How long can I stay? Evelyn's heart tightened. Not where is it? Not is there Wi-Fi? How long can I stay? Evelyn smiled gently. We'll figure that out together. Lily looked toward the nearest cottage. Does the bedroom door lock? For a moment, Evelyn was 24 again, sitting in a law office asking the same question about a broken house. Yes, she said. You'll have your own key. Lily looked down quickly, but not before Evelyn saw the tears. That evening, Evelyn returned to the old house. A fire burned in the stone hearth. Her mother's photograph rested on the mantel. Henry's journal sat on a shelf nearby. And upstairs, inside a bedroom closet, was a faded green backpack with a broken zipper. Empty. Evelyn stood in front of it for a long time. Once, that backpack had carried her whole life. Now it carried nothing. She closed the closet door. Outside, warm lights glowed from 8 small cottages among the main pines. 8 locked doors. 8 sets of keys. 8 people who knew where they would sleep in the morning. Evelyn stepped onto the porch. Snow had begun to fall. Soft, quiet, almost gentle. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn Harper wasn't wondering where she would go next. She was already home. For most of her life, Evelyn Harper believed survival meant being ready to leave. Keep your shoes close. Know where the exit is. Never own more than you can carry. Then Henry Caldwell left her a broken house. He couldn't return the childhood she'd lost or warm the nights she'd spent outside. But he gave Evelyn one last chance to do something with a promise he had failed to keep. Years later, on a snowy evening at Caldwell Harbor, Evelyn saw Lily standing outside one of the cottages with a frightened young girl. The girl held a backpack tightly against her chest. "How long can I stay?" she asked. Evelyn stopped walking. She knew that question. Lily smiled gently, long enough to stop being afraid of morning. Evelyn lowered her eyes as tears filled them, and in that moment she understood. Henry had left her a house. Evelyn had turned it into a home. And now someone else was carrying that kindness forward. That night, Evelyn opened her bedroom closet. Her faded green backpack still sat in the back. Once, her entire life had fit inside it. Now it was empty. Evelyn smiled and closed the door. Outside, warm lights glowed between the main pines. Behind those windows were people who knew where they would sleep tomorrow night. Maybe that's what a legacy really is. Knowing someone is a little less afraid because you were here. Evelyn inherited a crumbling house. But the greatest thing she found wasn't hidden beneath it. It was the chance to become the home she had spent her whole life searching for. If this story stayed with you,